Hey, what's up? It's Kit. Time for another video. Today, we'll talk about these awesome little things right here. If you're new to the channel, by the way, and this is your first time joining us, welcome. And if you like what you see, please consider subscribing. There are a lot of videos similar to this in the channel. This channel talks about the hows and whys of fishing. We cover everything from big game, ultralight, everything in between, including fly fishing. And today we're talking about micro jigs. Micro jigs are more than just their big counterparts. Although you do find micro versions of something like this, which is that. As you can see, it's really just a scaled down version. However, there's more to it than just that. There are some that are specifically engineered for shallow water fishing. And when you look at the bigger counterparts, you'll see that it's totally different. Now, here's a very good example right here. Okay, so this thing is actually the big version of this. Now, they don't have the same action. This is actually an entirely different lure. So this is, I think, 200 something, but it's 300 grams. This is 15. So totally different. And the concept, because of how it's worked, is totally different. Now remember, when you're fishing bigger jigs, such as these, you're actually fishing on a boat and you're fishing straight down. Whereas with the smaller jigs, there's going to be a bit of variation in their design philosophy because they're not designed to be fished straight down. Instead, they're designed to be actually cast out from shore and fished with a line that's practically diagonal from the rod tip. So there are design changes for some, because they want to be consistent with the actions of the bigger ones. So it could be also that the smaller versions are designed for something really specific, like take for example longer hang time, longer fluttering action, instead of just going straight to the bottom and all that. And now also remember that you're dealing with shallower water than when you're fishing off a boat. So they have to maximize whatever inherent action the jig has, so designs will and do vary. A very good example, and I'm gonna tell you guys a story here. A very good example would be this jig. Now, this is a Jig Para 10 gram. When it was first introduced, the 10 gram was already it. Okay, so there was a 10 gram, and then the next size was 20. Which I'll take out of the packet here for you so that you can see. Now, I was under the impression, or we all were, that when we got the 10, that the 20 would be pretty much the same jig, only, of course, it's heavier. We couldn't have been more wrong, because when we look closely, the actions were really different from the 10 to the 20. And remember, this is just essentially doubling the weight of the jig. Now, this has a bit more flatter profile, and if you look at this, it's a bit thicker on the side, so the proportion is totally different. Now, although we could say that it's kind of like just the enlarged version, when you see the action in the water, it's totally different. Of course, this is also designed to be cast out. However, the action is totally different. Okay, now the action might be the same to you sometimes when you're looking at it in front, but when you're casting out towards deeper water, there's current that affects it, and that's really where you actually see. The jig, because of the weight, also changes the dynamic slightly, because weight, when the weight only kicks in when there's not enough current. But if there's a strong current, what happens is that if it's lighter, it will twist and spin more. Whereas if it's heavier, it might still be able to reach the bottom. In some areas, it's just different that way. And because of the lighter weight, current affects it more. So I quickly discovered that this flutters a lot more than this. The action of this 20-gram version goes out when you're actually pumping it in. Now, in contrast, you have a 15-gram version of this, like the one we have here. That's all snagged with the others. So, oh, this is also a 10, sorry, but they have actually a live color. This is the 15-gram version right here. Okay, so the 15-gram version is exactly the same as the 10. Now, even with the 15, and it's only 5 grams less than this, you can see that the shape is totally different. So the 15 and the 10 will have the same action. However, if you go to the 20, it's totally different. So this is just one of those variances I was talking about. You know, sometimes these variances are very blatant, such as this, which you don't even notice them. So be mindful when you're actually buying jigs, because that's one thing that throws a lot of people off. They think that, you know, it's the same, but it's not. Okay, now when you're buying jigs, it's also a good idea to stick to kind of a format. So this is a 50 or a 10-gram jig. Now if you look, compare it with another 10, it's a bit narrower. Okay, now we go to another 10, narrower still, and you can see that this is very narrow, a bit wide. Now it doesn't have to be brand specific, but it's always a good idea to actually have these three. Now where you would use them would be when the water is not moving too fast. You could use something that's wide and it'll give you a very nice fluttering action. When the water moves a little faster, go to the next one, which is a bit narrow. When the water's moving really fast, you go to something that's even narrower. Now, what happens is when you cast these out, now mind you, these are all 10 grams. Now, sometimes because of the shape, not sometimes, but because of the shape, and because it's designed to flutter on the drop, the current heavily hits it, and before you know it, your jig is already way to the left or way to the right, whichever the current's going. And most times you don't really catch fish like that because it spins. So the faster the current, the narrower your jig should be, and it'll give you the most natural action which the fish respond to. Again, it depends on the fish that you're targeting and the place that you're fishing, but it's always a good idea to actually have a variety of jigs, from something that's very wide, such as that, to something super narrow. Obviously, you know, you also look at fast versions, slow, sliders, and all that. It depends on you, but the most basic thing is for you to actually have something wide, less wide, and narrow. Now, weights. As far as weights are concerned, I don't go too far of a variance. There's probably just a 10-gram variance for me. Now, here's a very good example. So a 10 up to a 20, which would be my maximum in most cases. Okay, so something like that. So the 10-gram variance, okay, the 10-gram variance from 20 to 10 gives me a very good range, because I could use 10, 12, 15, there's 17 grams, 18, 20, all that. And they give different fall ratios, which gives you a really good way of actually covering the water column and targeting the fish that you want to catch. Sometimes you want something small like this, which is a 15 gram, as opposed to something that's wide, such as this. But there are also times when the fish are stuck or stationed near the middle of the water column. They're positioned that way, and these things the 15-gram ones that flutter more in the middle, and the drop is slower, would actually catch you more fish. Now, there's a difference between just casting, letting them drop, and jigging them back in. Both of those are great to cover water, but when the fish are really homing in into something that's fluttering from the top, as soon as it drops, you better be covered, and not just by the types of jigs that you actually just cast and jig in. There are also jigs that you don't have to actually do anything with. So these are new types of jigs. Not just Major Craft is not the only one that has them, but these jigs are designed to be cast out and just reeled in. That's it. They have their own action. They work. I've used them. Quite happy with them. Sometimes when I'm feeling a bit lazy, I'd have to admit these things are actually great. So these are 10 grams. You don't have to do anything special. Just cast them out, reel them in, and they work. Now, another good purpose for this is also for exploring. Now, when you're using something like this, okay, that flutters a lot, you don't really cover as much ground as you want. And sometimes when you're using something like this, where you actually have to move fast, you tend to actually miss some pockets or some water column areas that you should be actually working as well. So these are actually really good for that, because you can cast it out, you just reel it in. It acts like a plug in a small compact package, which means you could cast it out really far, even if it's the same weight as probably something like this, and they go farther because their shape is a bit more aerodynamic. So it's always a good idea to actually have a variety of lures. Sometimes something like this happens. So again, it's all about the current, it's all about the area you're fishing in and the size of the bait fish that are present in the area. So again, I can't emphasize having different sizes and different jigs in the tackle box. I mean, one time when I actually get the chance to take you guys fishing with me in the pond, I'm going to show you exactly what the contents of my tackle box is, and also discuss my whole arsenal of lures and what the thought is when putting them together. But for me, it's always a good idea to actually have something that is easy to work, okay, such as these. Now, when you're casting this, they're always going to be, this is the Manma Saba from Sea Falcon. Okay, so when you're casting these are always going to drop with the belly side down, because the weight, this is, the profile is actually a bit triangular, if you can see there. Okay, so the weight is always on the bottom. Now, the good thing about this is that you cast it out, you reel it in, and it swims really well on its own. But when you jerk it, when you're jigging it, it actually has a very good flashing, darting action. So sometimes that slight variation on what you're throwing will trigger the fish. Now, also when you're fishing, take for example, you're catching on a koika a lot, and then all of a sudden, the bites start dropping. You switch to another lure, okay? Always a very good, even when they're biting a lot on the lure, just to not make them stop, you have to rotate your lure. So a variety of jigs is always a welcome addition to any tackle box. But again, remember that when you're putting this together, okay, always keep in mind the dimensions, that you have something that is wide, semi-narrow, and narrow. Okay, so build your system according to that, and you'll find success. Now, if you're going after bigger fish, just a little reminder, there is a video I actually published a few weeks ago, that talks about upgrading your hooks when you're targeting bigger fish with these jigs. Okay, now there's a lot to be discussed still more about these things. So right now, this is just, let's say, part one for these, and later on I'll show you the differences and the design, how people actually do the concept so differently when it comes to just casting jigs. Okay, so that's on the next video, but for now, that's it. And I hope you learned something. If I missed something, or if you have questions about this, please drop a comment down below and let's start a discussion. But for now, that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Class dismissed.